There is something in the place where you sleep that has been speaking against you every single night. Not a person, not a memory, a physical object, something you walk past every single morning without giving it a second thought. And every time you pass it, every time your eyes move over it without seeing it, the upper world receives a signal, not in words, in the language the spiritual plane uses to measure readiness, to measure whether a person is prepared to receive or not. You don't hear it, but it is being heard. I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes because what I am going to show you today, most people spend their entire lives never knowing. They work hard, they pray, they try, and still the overflow never comes. Not because the blessing isn't there, because the place they live in is communicating something they never authorized it to say. And before I tell you what that is, I need you to understand one thing first. The answer is not in your mindset. It is not in your discipline. It is not in how early you wake up or how many affirmations you repeat in the mirror. It is in your space. But here's what you don't know yet. It is not just the space itself. It's what the space is holding. And that is exactly what I'm going to unpack for you. Stay until the end because the most dangerous part is not the first thing I show you. It's the last. And if you leave early, you will leave with the wound still open. If this is your first time on this channel and this kind of teaching is new to you, subscribe right now, because what I bring here is not inspiration, it is spiritual law. And once you understand how it operates, you will never look at your home, your car, your desk, or your phone the same way again. Now, let's go back to that thing in your space. The Talmud teaches that the physical world is not separate from the spiritual world. It is the language the spiritual world uses to evaluate the human being standing inside it. When the Mishkan was built in the desert, every single detail of its construction was given with precision, not because the Almighty needed a beautiful tent, but because the physical structure was a message. The arrangement of the space communicated the readiness of the people to receive the Shekinah, the divine presence. What this means for you today, in the space where you eat and sleep and plan your future, is this. Your physical environment is actively communicating your spiritual condition to the upper world, and the upper world is listening. Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself, because no one else is watching. When you walk into the space where you spend most of your time, do you feel something open up inside you? Or do you feel something close? Most people, when they sit with that question honestly, feel something close. A kind of tightness. A low-level heaviness they've grown so used to. They stopped noticing it years ago. They call it stress. They call it adult life. They call it the economy. It is none of those things. It is the signal their space has been sending without their permission. I had a man come to me, I'll call him David, and David was a man who had been working in his field for 11 years. Skilled, experienced, known by people who knew people, and for 11 years he had been making almost exactly the same amount. Not growing, not collapsing, just suspended, like a clock with no hands that move. He came to me frustrated. He said, "Rabbi, I've done everything right. I tithe, I pray, I show up. I don't understand what's blocking me." I didn't answer him right away. I asked him a question instead. I said, "Describe the room where you work, not your office outside the home. The room in your house where you sit when you think about your future, when you plan, when you pray. Describe it to me." He described a room, and in 30 seconds, I knew exactly what was wrong. But I'm going to hold that answer for a moment, because before I tell you what I found in David's room, I need to show you the mechanism first, because if you don't understand the mechanism, the specific example won't help you. You need to see the law before you see it operating. Here is the law. The spiritual plane does not evaluate your intentions. It evaluates your vessel. A broken vessel cannot receive, regardless of how sincere the person holding it is. You can stand in the rain with a cracked cup for 40 years and remain thirsty. Not because the rain isn't falling, because the vessel isn't holding. This is not a metaphor, this is mechanics. And the question you need to ask is not, am I working hard enough? The question is, what is my vessel communicating right now without my knowledge that is telling the upper world I am not ready? Because the upper world doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It reads whether you are. And it reads that from the physical environment you've created and maintained around you. Now I'm going to show you how it reads. And the first layer is not the one most people expect. It does not look dangerous. It does not look like a problem. That is exactly why it is the most effective at blocking what belongs to you. There is a kind of object that is not broken, not dirty, does not look like a problem. In fact, if you asked the person keeping it why they keep it, they would give you a beautiful answer. They would say, "It reminds me of where I came from. It carries meaning for me. It is part of my story." And I will tell you what the Talmud says about objects that carry stories. It says that an object absorbs the energy of the emotional environment in which it lived. If that object spent years in a home of struggle, of unresolved tension, of financial pressure, it carries that record. And when you bring that record into your space begins to resonate with it. You are not honoring your past. You are replaying it. I knew a woman. I'll call her Miriam. And Miriam had a table in her dining room that had been in her family for decades. The table itself was fine, but that table had sat in her grandmother's house during years of shortage, of rationing, of making do with less. Every meal on that table was a meal of, "We don't have enough." Miriam loved the table. It made her feel connected. What she didn't notice was that every financial conversation in her home happened at that table. Every budget that got tight. Every time she said, "We can't afford that." Every decision made from fear instead of abundance. When she understood what that table was carrying and removed it from the center of her home, the shift was concrete. Within 45 days, her husband received a contract offer he had been waiting on for 2 years, and for the first time in their marriage, they closed a month with more than they spent. Not because the table was cursed, because the energy of not enough had been the daily atmosphere of every decision they made, and they had been breathing it without knowing it. This is the law operating, not magic, not coincidence, law. Now, walk through your space right now in your mind, not looking for garbage, not looking for what's visibly broken, looking for what is emotionally heavy, what carries the energy of a period in your life when you were smaller than you are called to be. Those objects are not decorations. They are altars, and you have been worshipping at them without knowing it. This is the first layer. But here is what I need you to understand is it's not just what you're keeping, it's what you're tolerating. And those are two different problems. What you're keeping, you chose. What you're tolerating, you stopped seeing. There is a category of object in your space that you did not choose to keep. It is simply there. It has been there so long that your eyes have learned to pass over it. A broken drawer you've been meaning to fix for 2 years. A light that doesn't work the way it should. A cabinet that doesn't close all the way. These are not minor annoyances. In spiritual law, a broken thing in your space is a declaration. It says, the person who lives here accepts incompleteness. The person who lives here has decided that dysfunction is a permanent condition. The Talmud carries a principle, Bal Tashchit, which forbids the unnecessary degradation of anything under your authority. Your space is under your authority. What you allow to remain broken in your space, you have authorized, you have signed your name to it spiritually. And this is where I need to confront something most teachers will not say directly. Some of you are tolerating broken things in your space, not because you don't have the ability to fix them. You are tolerating them because fixing them would require you to admit that you have been living below your level of authority for a long time, and that admission is uncomfortable. So instead, you say, it's just a drawer. It's not a big deal. What you are really saying is, I have decided to live in incompleteness and call it normal. The upper world does not release overflow into normal. It releases overflow into readiness. And readiness has a physical address. That address is your space. Now, this is where I come back to David. When David described his room to me, he mentioned 2 things. First, a desk covered entirely in papers he hadn't touched in months, stacked in a pattern of, I'll deal with this later. Second, almost, as an aside, a coat hanging on the back of his chair that had belonged to his father who had worked the same job for 30 years without promotion. The same job, 30 years, no movement. David had inherited the coat because it was his father's. He had kept it because it felt like love. It was not love, it was inheritance, and not the kind you want. Within 3 weeks of clearing that desk and removing that coat from his workspace, not throwing it away, putting it in a place that was not his place of work and vision, David received an offer from a client who had been considering him for 2 years. 2 years of maybe. 3 weeks of preparation. That is not coincidence. That is the vessel becoming ready. And here is what I need you to feel right now, because I am about to show you the third layer. And this one is the one that stops the overflow even when you've addressed everything else. Because this one is not about what's broken. It is not about what's heavy. It is about what's absent. And before I show you, if you are carrying a need right now, a burden you brought into this video without knowing you would find this teaching today, a financial pressure, a family situation, a prayer that has been going up for months without a visible answer, leave your name in the comments right now, just your first name. I'm going to pray for every single person who leaves their name, because you do not have to carry this alone. And intercession, someone standing with you in the spiritual, is not a small thing. It is a weapon. Leave your name, I will see it. Now, the third layer. There is a law in the preparation of the Mishkan that is rarely taught in its practical application. When the artisans finished building it, every vessel, every curtain, every structure, they were told to leave a specific space empty, not as an oversight, as an intentional declaration. The empty space was the invitation. It was the physical statement that said, there is room here for what has not yet arrived. Most people's spaces have no empty space. Every shelf is full, every corner occupied, every surface carrying something, and they wonder why nothing new enters their life. You cannot receive what you have left no room for. Fullness without intention is stagnation dressed as stewardship. You are not being a good manager of your space. You are blocking the entrance to the next level. The empty corner is not laziness. The clear shelf is not waste. It is a declaration in physical form that says, I am expecting something. I have made room, I am ready. Now I am going to give you the application. 3 things, 3 decisions. You can make all 3 today, before tonight, and none of them cost money. The only cost is what you have been avoiding. The first, and walk through every room in your space and identify one object that is emotionally heavy, not visibly broken, not dirty, emotionally heavy, something that carries the energy of a period in your life when you were living below your calling. You know which one it is. You have walked past it 100 times. Remove it from the center of your space. Put it in a box. Store it somewhere. It is no longer in your daily line of sight. You are not destroying the past. You are refusing to worship it. The second, identify one broken thing, one thing that does not work the way it should, and fix it today, not next week, not when you have more time. Today, because every day that passes with a broken thing in your space, you are renewing a declaration of incompleteness. Break that declaration today, even if the fix is small, especially if the fix is small. The upper world is not measuring the size of the repair. It is measuring the decision. The third, create one empty space, one surface, one shelf, one corner that has nothing on it. Clear it with intention, and when you finish clearing it, speak out loud, not in your head, out loud, and say, I am making room. What belongs to me has room to arrive. This is not a ritual of superstition. This is a declaration of faith with a physical address. You are saying in the language of the physical world what you have only been saying in the language of prayer. And the upper world responds to both languages together, not one without the other. I had a young man in my community, I'll call him Eli, who had been trying to launch a business for 3 years, not for lack of intelligence, not for lack of contacts. He had everything he needed except the breakthrough. When he described his workspace, it was a desk completely covered. Papers, objects, screens, old notebooks, not a single inch of clear surface. And in the corner of his room was a box of his father's belongings that had been sitting there since his father passed 4 years prior. Unpacked, not because he didn't have time, because every time he approached it, the grief was too big and he walked away. That box was not a storage problem. That box was an unresolved spiritual claim on his space. His entire environment had been living in the energy of loss, of pause, of, I can't deal with this yet, for 4 years. Within 3 weeks of addressing both, the desk and the box, something opened, quietly, like a door that had been stuck finally moving on its hinges. The business found its first real client, then another, then another. The law worked, not because Eli was more worthy than before, because the vessel was finally prepared. Now I want to speak to you directly, because one of 2 things is happening inside you right now. Either you are feeling the discomfort of recognition, you know exactly which object, which corner, which broken thing I have been describing, because it's yours. You have known about it. You have been walking past it, And today is the day you stop. Or you are feeling something more defended, a voice that says, my situation is different. My problem is bigger than this. I need to speak to that voice directly, because that voice has a name in the Torah. It is not discernment. It is not wisdom. It is the voice that has kept you exactly where you are. It is the voice that turns every diagnosis into an exception, every instruction into an, in my case, it's different. Your case is not different. The law does not make exceptions. It operates exactly the same for the person who thinks their situation is too complex as it does for the person who simply obeys. The only difference is outcome. And this is the cost I need to name clearly. The cost of applying what I've shown you today is 15 minutes of your time and a decision you've been avoiding. That is the only cost. The cost of not applying it is already being paid. Every day you wake up inside the same ceiling. Every month the number doesn't change. Every year the prayer goes up and the answer comes back as silence. That is not the Almighty withholding. That is the vessel refusing to be prepared. And that cost is more than you will ever admit. The Torah teaches that a declaration made in the physical world carries legal weight in the spiritual world. Not a feeling, not an intention, a declaration. Words spoken out loud, with witnesses, in the language of commitment. So here is what I am asking you to do right now, not tomorrow. Right now, while this is still alive in you. If you are ready to break the agreement your space has been making without your permission, if you are ready to stop walking past what you already know needs to go, write one word in the comments. Just one word. Write ready. That is your declaration. That is the moment the decision stops being information and becomes law. And the upper world registers declarations. It registers when a person stops watching and starts moving. Write it. And then go move. Now, one more thing before you go. If this channel has been adding something real to your spiritual life, subscribe right now and turn on the bell. Not for me, for yourself, because every time a new teaching arrives, you will be there to receive it at full strength, not weeks later when the moment has already passed. The next 30 days are not neutral. The environment you maintain from today forward is the message the upper world will read when it evaluates whether your vessel is ready for what has been assigned to your name. Not in a year, not after more prayer. Now, in the physical decisions you make tonight, before you sleep, the window that is open right now, this moment of clarity, this pressure you are feeling, it does not stay open. It closes. And when it closes, what replaces it is the same routine, the same ceiling, the same "I'll deal with it later" that has cost you more than you will ever admit. You know what to remove. You know what to repair. You know what space to clear. Do it today, before tonight. That is not a suggestion. That is the instruction. Shalom, my friend. Until next time.